Hi everybody, it's Jim from Sprague Woodturning. This week we're going to use some more awesome maple burl along with some beautifully tinted Designer Epoxy to make a custom project for those Bourbon Guys. So in this video, I'm actually going to be making a turntable cover, and if you're not aware what a turntable is, I use one at the end of my videos. This is for those Bourbon Guys, AJ and Ryan. They have it suggests a bourbon channel, whiskey channel. So if you're interested in learning about bourbons and whiskeys, check them out. I will leave a link in the description down below. And what we're going to use is some maple burl. Still have to clean off a lot of this bark area. And the primary color we're going to use here is ocean blue because that's kind of the color in their logo. And we'll use the pearl gold as an accent. Now this turntable is almost 11.5 inches across, so it's a pretty big piece. So we're going to have to be careful when we lay this out to make sure that it's actually going to fit correctly and we're going to have a large enough piece. All right, let's first of all lay this out and cut it on the bandsaw, and then we don't maybe have to clean up as much. I've got all these templates for different buckets that I use, so it certainly helps when you're making stuff like this if you want to quickly cut out your pieces. So make some templates, it's well worth it. So you may be wondering how I ended up with this commission. A guy by the name of Joe who's bought some stuff from me here in the last couple of years. He's a whiskey and bourbon connoisseur, as am I, and he said, well, have you ever heard of those Bourbon Guys? And I'm like, no, I haven't. So, I kind of want to educate myself a little bit in that area as well. So I started watching AJ and Ryan, and, we've become, I'll call it YouTube friends along with Joe. And they do a live stream not every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, but most Fridays. And it's fun. They're a couple of fun guys. And if you're curious about learning about bourbons and whiskeys, check them out. All right, I thought I'd show you this method if you haven't seen it before as far as calculating volume of resin is concerned. Put your wood pieces in. There, that's about level. There are a couple of voids underneath, so I'll put a little bit more on than I usually would. Then dump it into a container, measure it. All right, so the way this works is you measure the volume of rice where you wanted it. In this case, it comes up to 1.75 liters, and you'll times that by 40%. 1.75 times 40% equals 0.7, and then plus 1.75 is 2 liters. We'll call it 2.5 liters because it'll be easier to mix that way. But that should give you a rough idea as to how much resin you need when you're doing a pour such as this. All right, let's mix up some resin. I wanted some good color separation in this project, so that's why I'm going with the Art Cast. The only limitation with it, of course, is the 1-inch depth of pour. That's the only limitation really with Art Cast. But if you're looking for color separation, it is very easy to achieve with Art Cast, that's for sure. That was the ocean blue, in case you missed it, and of course the pearl gold. Now I wanted to add the gold with the blue because I find that they really go well together. The gold isn't necessarily in their logo, but I thought that it would be something cool to add to it. All right, so now it's just a waiting game. We're going to wait for this to get up to about 45 degrees. That's probably not going to be a problem with the larger blue containers, since there's a smaller volume with the gold. So these are sitting at about 31 degrees, and the smaller one's sitting at 26 and climbing. So what I'm going to probably do is just leave these as they are out here, and then I'm going to take the gold and put it in near the heater in my clean room, and then that way hopefully it'll warm up to about the same temperature at the same time, and then we'll do the pour. 42, 46, definitely. I decided to put this smaller one into some water that's been warmed up to help it cure up a bit. It's not as much, the temperature's not as high as the other ones are, but kind of really don't have a choice. I got to go with it. Artcast is a 1-to-1 resin, and 1-to-1 resins are typically thicker than, say, the 2-to-1 resin deep cast. So a way around that is to warm up the jugs in warm water, and then when you add A and B together, they'll mix together a lot easier, and you'll also have less bubbles after you're done mixing. And this is over the manufacturer's recommended depth. It's probably about 1.5 inches, so I don't know how that's going to go for us. There is a real good chance that this is going to thermal crack, but I hope not. All right, I'm going to get this into the pressure pot, and we'll see you tomorrow. Well, it is in fact the next day, and indications look good that there's no thermal cracking. However, this must have got hot enough that it broke the glue free on this side, because it looks like the casting's tilted up a little bit like this. Now this wasn't cut off exactly straight, 2.5 there and 3. So yeah, it's lifted 1/2 inch on this side, I think anyway. The resin has kind of pulled away from the edge, which tells me it went underneath. So as long as there's no thermal cracking on the bottom of this, we should be good. That is in there. Breaking my bucket all up here. Well, it's free all the way around the side. It's moving. Wow, that's the piece that I had the tuck tape on. Actually ripped it from the from the bucket. Holy crap. The whole idea of using this tuck tape is this should just come right off. It's like that. So what's happening here? Did this lift? No, I don't think it did. One was a little thicker, I guess. I don't see any thermal cracking either. I would say that it did come up a little bit on this one side. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. Lifted maybe 1/8 of an inch by the looks of it. I'm really surprised that that did not thermal crack. And I mean, we don't know for sure yet. That's 2 inches, and you know the air cast is only recommended for 1 inch of depth. But looks like we've got lucky and pulled it off. All right, so the plan is to run this through the drum sander and to get 2 flat parallel surfaces. I can already tell that this isn't sitting straight, so what I might do is just take a couple of shims and put them on the back. That way this thing runs through the drum sander straight, and then once I get a flat surface, then I can just flip that over and do the rest of it. So over the last few years, people have said, you know, why did these castings stick so badly in your buckets? And probably the main reason is the hot melt glue. Now, a lot of times you don't want to put a weight on the top of the casting because that weight may sink down into the resin and affect your design. And that was kind of the issue here. So I have waxed buckets just with paste wax, and they come right out with no issues at all. But of course, if you wax the bottom of the bucket and then you put the hot melt glue on it, well, it may not stay. So that's why I don't do that when I'm doing castings like this. Now you can see that black mark on the sandpaper here, and that comes from the hot melt glue as well. And I know that I probably could have put some isopropanol alcohol on there and cleaned all that glue off prior to this, but this was an old belt, so I wasn't real concerned anyway. But I am showing you a way to get around that. So I just chipped off any of that, and it's pretty much just set. It's hard. So it just kind of flakes off, and then you may have to do it a couple of times, but usually after you do that, it actually cleans the belt up quite nicely, and you can get rid of those burn marks. I did cut a lot of footage out of here. I know that this isn't really wood turning, so a lot of people don't really care to watch this kind of footage, but I did cut a bunch of it out of here if you're curious, and every now and then you might see my bald head in the frame. Oh, look, there it is now. Once the excess resin was removed, there was in fact there was actually a number of thermal cracks, but they were deep down inside of the casting and just really couldn't see them up until now. So I'm just using some thin Starbond. I probably should have just not even bothered with this because I'm going to do a resin coat finish on the bottom side and on the top side of this piece, but I thought that maybe we might be able to clean this up and then not really have to worry so much about filling in any gaps later on. I didn't wait long enough for the Starbond to set, so I had to hit it again with the accelerator. So we do have a thermal crack there, filled it full of the CA glue. It's still taking a while for it to cure up, but I think I'm going to make this the bottom side. This here looks really even. There's a nice balance between the resin and the pieces of wood. So I think that this will be the top side of the turntable cover, and that will be the bottom. That way we can hopefully delete this thermal crack that we have here. And yeah, I mean, this is a kind of a strange size. So to find center, I'm just going to use these dividers. Now, some of you might be wondering why I'm not using my clear plastic center finder. The reason for that is because it's not large enough. This casting is actually quite a bit bigger than it is. So there's our center, and of course, I'm measuring from here, not the very end, because we need the wood in this piece, so it's best to just go to the wood and not the resin that you see on the outside. That's probably as good as it's going to get. Starting off with the Hercules, this is the number 3 or the 5/8 diameter one, the largest one. And I don't want any ghosting on the edge of this, so I don't want to be seeing wood underneath of the epoxy. So I'm just trimming this back. Got to be really careful though, because I don't have a ton of, the diameter of this piece is pretty close to the finished piece. So I got to be really careful when I'm doing this. I should also mention that AJ likes to watch wood turning videos. I believe that, he just finds them relaxing. And oddly enough, the last few years here, well, I guess, 3 years I've been on here now, that a lot of people have mentioned that they really like watching my wood turning videos, just to basically sit back and relax too. And I never really thought that was going to be a thing, but but it is. And AJ, of course, is one of them as well, that it just enjoys watching wood turning and relaxing. Now, a lot of people don't like the fact that I do these voiceovers, but anyway, I know that the majority do. They enjoy the information that I can give them, and so I have no intentions of changing, not doing voiceovers anytime soon, that's for sure. When we came out of the drum sander, we had 2 parallel surfaces, but of course when you mount it between centers, it's very difficult to get that running perfectly true again. I do have a cone that I could have reversed and put onto my live center that's in the tailstock, but at the time I didn't think about it. That would be fine to use, as long as you've got good pressure, going against the drive center that's in the chuck. Then shouldn't be any worries about it coming off the lathe. But at the time, I just didn't think about it. The plan is to put a glue block on this and then move it outboard. So I'm just grinding down the high spots where the live center and the drive center were. Now it's mounted in the coal jaws, and I'm just cleaning off. This is going to be the top side of the turntable, and we'll be able to put a glue block on this side. That way I can basically mortise out the back side of this piece so it slips over the top of the turntable. And there's your hot melt glue and waste block. As we work on the bottom side of this piece, that previous clip, you can see as it was getting close to the center, I probably really needed to slow down my feed rate. I knew that I had to remove probably 3/4 of an inch, so I wasn't too concerned about the resin chipping out. This cut that I'm doing now is probably the safest to do. Tool's at a 45-degree angle, and it just cuts really, really well in that mode. And it also, you have less chipping. You can see the streamers that are coming off of this, and that it's not an easy thing to get when you're working with burl and resin, to get streamers like this, because resin, by this stage, this resin is fully cured and it's wanting to chip out and shatter. Like I've said in previous videos, your feed rate is really important when you're working with resin. You got to slow it right down. I don't know what it would be compared to normal wood, but you just can't hog off as much resin as you can wood. So it is certainly a lot slower to turn resin than wood, but you know, the end results are just really awesome. I did a push cut there, but this time my feed rate was a lot slower, and you know, you probably didn't really have any chipping out as well. So you know, if you're willing to risk it and you're in get her done mode, you can take aggressive bites, but you know, just keep in mind that it could actually come back and actually bite you very badly. Another thing that a lot of turners struggle with, and I'm probably no different than them, is achieving a flat surface. So I need a flat surface on the bottom side of this so that when it sits down on the turntable, it doesn't rock back and forth. And of course, I need a flat surface on the top. Now you can get away with, since I'm going to be doing a resin pour, you can get away with that because of course resin is liquid and liquid will always find level. So as long as you level the piece prior to putting the resin on, it should in reality be a flat surface. The sidewall pieces on this ended up being quite thin, and that was more or less by design. If you had left the sidewall, say, a 1/4 inch thick like they are there, and when that sits on the turntable, you would have this big thick lip hanging over it, and I just don't think that would have looked good. So I went for a thinner sidewall. The only issue may be that you might be able to see through where the resin is, but of course a way around that would be to, if they want to, they can paint the back side of this black, and then of course when the light shines on it, you won't be able to see any shadows in behind the resin areas. But I just didn't think that it would have looked right with it being kind of a thickish button appearance, if you will. A fairly easy way to get relatively flatness on your piece is to do what I'm doing here. I've got the tool basically held at a specific angle. That angle doesn't change. It does a little bit at the end. Theoretically, the tool rest would be further to the left, and then basically you're using your index finger as a guide, and as long as you maintain the same angle all the way through the piece, then it should give you a flat-ish surface. The top of the turntable is a little bit thicker than the sidewalls is. It's probably about twice as thick. And I actually didn't measure it, but it's probably 3/8 of an inch, somewhere around there. And they're going to be placing full bottles of whiskey and bourbon on top of this. So, you know, I need it to be a little bit more durable than, say, the sidewalls are going to be, because they're not really going to have any pressure on them. So that's why it's a little thicker on the top as opposed to side skirts. Yeah, that's what we'll call them, side skirts. So this is 80 grit sandpaper, and again, you can get these sanding sheets from sandpaper.ca. And I've got a wooden block inside of it, so that's helping me maintain a nice flat surface. And you'll see as I work away at this, eventually you'll get a scratch pattern that's even all the way across it. And then just checking for flatness there, not quite yet. And anyway, if you've got a straight edge like I did with that ruler, then you'll be able to basically get a perfectly flat surface. And then once you've got that flat surface, it's easier to maintain with power sanding. And I do prefer to do power sanding, even though this is the underside of the table. Theoretically, it may never even come off again. They may just leave it on there. Last thing I want to do is just crispen up that little edge from sanding to make sure there's no issues there, and then sand the inside of the skirt, and then we'll be ready to do our first resin pour finish on the bottom anyway. Okay, I've mixed up a little bit of art cast here, and I don't know if you can see these. There is some thermal cracks here, so I'm just going to try and drizzle this into those cracks, and then we'll give this a nice coat of this art cast, and that should seal it up really good. Some of these have little voids over here, so I'll try and fill those up best I can as well before I dump this on here. Now I'm going to dump some of this out. Keep in mind that this is the bottom side, so I mean, as far as the quality of the finish is concerned, I'm not real concerned about that. So the important thing right now is to make sure that all the wood is sealed up well, and of course the resin does a real good job of that. It's funny, I dumped a bunch of that off and then I re-leveled it again, and I was trying to get the resin to kind of flatten out, and I don't know, maybe I just wasn't patient enough. So I burned off a bunch of bubbles like I am here, and like, I looked at it and I'm not happy with that. And then I ended up basically dumping the finish back on, or the resin back on that I took out, and then that way it gave me a nice flat surface. It's very important to have the piece leveled before the resin actually sets. There, we'll leave that overnight, and we should be able to hopefully put the next coat on the very top, the important surface. Wow, look at that burl. Is that ever pretty? See you tomorrow. Since this waste block was at the end of its life, I decided to just take the faceplate off it, and then that way we can use the 5/8 bowl gouge by David Ellsworth just to take down the remainder of that waste block prior to flattening the very top of the turntable. I should also say that I'm using my one-way vacuum chuck system, and I got the complete system from oneway.ca. This is a better example. I've got the tool rest further to the left now. That way I can basically ride the tool rest all the way to the very center of the piece. And I do find that this, prior to sanding, is the most effective way to flatten something, as long as the tool rest is straight. I didn't mention it earlier, but the piece on the bottom side was sanded from 60 to 180. And then I sand it from 60 to 220 on the top surface prior to doing any resin finish. That's typically, I don't see the need to really go much higher than that, and it will also give the resin a good tooth to bite into. Okay, what I have here is 4 ounces of art cast. This is a spreader. You can get them pretty much any epoxy supplier. This one came from Arctic in Quebec. First time I've ever used one though. I don't really know what size I should be using. This is nice and level. I decided just to use the smallest notches that were on there. It seemed to work fine, so I guess that was the right decision. I'm not exactly sure why you would use the bigger notches. If you want to, I suppose if you're working with probably larger volumes of epoxy. But anyway, the smallest notches seem to work just fine, and then we'll blow off some bubbles. But man, when that finish goes on, or when that resin goes on, does it ever bring that burl alive. Beautiful stuff. I suspect we'll have to do this twice, so I'll keep blowing the bubbles off for as long as I can, and then we'll probably have to do a second coat tomorrow. See you tomorrow. Alrighty, well it is the next day, and as you can see, the resin is actually covered beautifully. There is only one spot up here where there's some bubbling after the fact. Very few little divots here where it's filled in some areas, so I'm just going to sand this back flat again, and then we'll do another pour. The sides didn't fare out as well. They definitely need another coat for sure, so I'll clean those up and then put some finish, or put the epoxy over them, and hopefully this time, since this has already got a coat on it, it'll be sealed up and we can finish this up. So this piece was sanded again with 220. The most difficult thing that I find when doing resin top coat finishes is the side skirts. And I had an issue on the burnt piece that I took and made into a little table, and this one was the same thing here. So you've got some sags and some runs, so that's really the most difficult thing that I find to doing these resin coats. All right, so what I have here is 4 ounces of art cast. Everything goes right, this should do it. There, I'll keep coming back on this, checking on it, blowing off any more bubbles, but hopefully if nothing gets embedded in it, that'll be it. Alright, that's it for the video. It is Thursday and I've got to get this edited and uploaded. Check out that burl. Just doesn't get any better than that. Again, the shine on this thing is crazy. Check that out. Love it. The resin itself, hoping to see more gold, but probably when I didn't plunge the stick in and push it deeper down in the casting. One thing about if you're doing resin finishes, you can't break through to the wood surface. And that's what I did here on the edge with those sags that were in place. I did some aggressive sanding to get rid of them, and I did break through in some areas, and like you can see right here in this area is kind of like dry. So I need to put another coat on the skirt around here. This piece is 11 5/8 across the top, and it's 1 inch high. And I think that's, yeah, it's might be 1/2 inch thick actually. And I think that it's best to leave it thicker on the top, just like I said in the video. The bottom side, some people might be saying, well, this should have been the side, and you know what? Yeah, might be right. But I do like the balance between how much wood there is and how much resin there is on the top surface. And I typically don't like to do these things unless, especially something that's got a tight tolerance like this to fit to that turntable. So my measurements say that it'll fit, and hopefully it does. Or I may have to, they may have to mail it back to me, and I may have to alter it or even make a new one. But hopefully it fits. It should fit, since AJ sent me those measurements, and if it doesn't fit, we'll blame him. Don't forget to put Designer Epoxy in the comments down below if you want to be entered into the 3-gallon kit at 100,000 subscribers. It has been a chore to get there. Things have really slowed down. The month of May has been absolutely brutal. I'm confident that we will get there eventually. And by leaving a comment down below, you'll also be entered into my bowl giveaway at 95,000 subscribers, which will probably be in a week or two. That's when we'll hit 95. What I want to do next week and the week after is shoot a processing video. So we're going to process logs into bowl blanks. I've got an oval cookie cutting rig that I'm going to showcase again. I don't have really any walnut boards, so that's mostly what we'll be cutting on there. Maybe a little bit of maple as well. But anyway, I want to show that again because I did shoot a video on that very early in my career, and I know that it hardly ever gets looked at, but I think it's a cool thing that my two sons and I made, so please come on back and check that out next week, weather permitting. Weather's been all over the place this spring, so I hopefully will be outside and be able to do that. Don't forget to check out those Bourbon Guys. Again, the link will be in the description down below. AJ and Ryan, a couple of funny guys, and thanks again to Joe for suggesting their content to me. And anyway, we've become friends, so hopefully you guys check them out and see what they've got to offer, especially if you're into the bourbon whiskey scene. All right, well, that's it. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it. And of course, that thumbs up will always help with the analytics. All right, well, that's it. See you next week.